Yeah, you staged it! You staged it! Staged it! You staged it! Freedom will be sanctioned! Child abuser! You staged this! You're a child abuser!
Now, dear Britons, you are under a blow that cannot be ignored. They're lying to you, and it's not just words, it's a cry from the soul. Many of you have always felt that there was something sinister hidden in the horrors that took place in Southport, but the authorities, like cowardly puppies, hid behind legal formalities and bureaucratic labyrinths. Yesterday, Keir Starmer, once a respected leader, admitted that he knew about Axel Rudekabena's dark past long before this shocking information became known to everyone.
Well, I think there are two separate and important issues there, Harry. The first is on the question of terrorism and what constitutes terrorism. And my concern in this case is that we have clearly got an example of extreme violence, individualised violence, that we have to protect our children from and our citizens from. And it is a new threat. It's not what we would have usually thought of as terrorism when definitions were drawn up, when guidelines were put in place, when the framework was put in place. And we have to recognise that here today, because I think most people would say, looking at the facts of this case, it's clearly extreme violence, it's clearly intended to terrorise.
Starmer faced a humiliating moment when his own supporters started booing him. His last speech, which was supposed to inspire and unite the crowd, turned into a real failure and caused a storm of anger. What did he say that turned the cheers into ridicule and discontent? Let's figure it out. Starmer was once a symbol of hope for the Labour Party, but now those glorious times seem like just a ghost slipping into the mists of the past. He came to Southport full of hopes for a warm welcome, because he is the leader of the Labour Party, but instead, he was faced with a harsh reality that he had not expected at all. How bitter it is to realise that hopes have turned into disappointment.
And I completely accept and understand that, and that is my view. Therefore, we have to make sure that the law and the framework for responding is appropriate to the new threat that we face. And there we will make whatever changes are necessary in the law to deal with it. On the second point, yes, of course I was kept up to date with the facts as they were emerging. That is usual practice. But just like you, as a journalist, I had to observe the law of the land. It was not my personal decision to withhold this information, any more than it was a journalist's personal decision not to print or write about it. That is the law of the land that is in place for the reasons I've set out, to protect the integrity of the system, to ensure that the victims and their families get the justice that they deserve.
The moment Starmer began his speech, the atmosphere in the hall instantly changed. It seemed as if the energy had just been ripped out of space, leaving only a void in its wake. People began to fidget nervously in their seats, exchanging looks full of bewilderment and shock. Is this really happening? The reaction was so obvious that it was impossible to ignore it. Disbelief, disappointment, and a growing sense of dissatisfaction filled the room like a storm about to break out. How do you perceive this? The Prime Minister continues to deliberately mislead the British people in order to maintain his point of view, and this is simply outrageous. His claims that he couldn't do anything sound like pathetic attempts to justify himself. How is it possible that the Crown Prosecution Service and the police knew about his manual with the title, as well as what he writes in his bedroom, and did not conclude that he would do something terrible?
How many more children have died on our streets, Prime Minister? How many more children? How many more children, Prime Minister? We're going to do something. What, we're going to stand up for our children? Yeah. Bye-bye. Got your face closed. Make real change, Prime Minister. Make a real change! Our children! Go away! You're not wanted!
The authorities didn't know anything about Starmer, but this is an outright lie, and it sounds like a punch in the face. He was sent to the extremism prevention program 3 times, and the police repeatedly visited him at his residential address. But it is especially important to understand exactly when Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper found out about his difficult past, and that he had found a manual that he had written himself. Let's be honest, he did it himself. It seems that he has completely forgotten the golden rule of a politician to know his audience. In Southport, he couldn't help but hit the nail on the head. Starmer came thinking he was the main event, but left looking more like the victim of a bad joke, leaving only confusion and bewilderment in his wake.
Yeah, come on in here, man.
Just listen to me. It's gone away. They've been on the front line keeping people alive. So I really don't need lectures from you about this pandemic. You've got one.
Come on in. Can we come in? Is that okay?
During his speech in Southport, Starmer was interrupted 5 times as he spoke about the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. It's not just a fight back, it's a full-scale rebellion, and every time the shock on his face spoke for itself. He genuinely couldn't understand why his own supporters were turning against him. But it's not just about Starmer. The Labour Party as a whole is gradually moving away from its difficult past, and this does not bode well. The Labour Party is actively criticising Starmer and the party leadership on social media, and this is not just noise, it can have real, disastrous consequences for the election. Polling stations remain, and Labour, which was once taken for granted, is gradually disappearing. If you're a stubborn person, then why don't you join a party that's calling on you to step away from one of the biggest political battles of the decade? The Labour supporters are furious, and their anger is off the charts. They are sure that Starmer has betrayed all the values for which the party is fighting. Left-wing MPs are not just unhappy, they are furious, accusing him of rejecting the traditional foreign policy of the Labour Party. This is not just a minor mistake, it is a real disaster, radically different from the behaviour of previous party leaders towards Trump. Jeremy Corbyn refused to attend a state banquet with Trump. Sadiq Khan openly condemned the ban on Muslims, and even Tony Blair, despite his differences, took a more balanced approach. But Starmer? He actually welcomes Trump with open arms. Labour has always positioned itself as a party opposed to figures like Trump. Now those who once trusted them feel betrayed and deceived. Starmer, who was once seen as Labour's saviour, is now facing a full-scale rebellion. And it's not just the leftists who have turned against him, the centrists are also starting to leave their posts. And this is only exacerbating the situation. The deputies are sharpening their knives, and there are already rumours that he will have to fight for leadership. Meanwhile, the polls are falling like a stone, and the approval rating of the Labour Party is rapidly declining. Even in its traditional strongholds, voters are starting to leave, leaving behind only disappointment and discontent. This is a real disaster for the party, which was once a symbol of hope for many. See you later.